The second apron low-key revived the sport, if we're being real. Well, let's talk about it. For the first time in NBA history, neither team competing in the NBA Finals is paying the luxury tax, and that signals a shift in how teams are built. Now more than ever, franchises can't just spend big to win. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Developing in-house talent, maintaining team-friendly deals, and stockpiling draft capital have evidently become the ways to build playoff-caliber rosters under the new CBA. In the entire history of the Indiana Pacers, owner Herb Simon has paid, in total, combined, less than $10 million in luxury tax penalties. But how have they been able to come this far without the bill coming due? Going into 2024, Tyrese's breakout year, they were operating with a treasure trove of cap space. So they turned Bruce Brown and a few picks into Pascal Siakam. When they maxed out Tyrese, they had a very clean cap sheet in the years to come. And the same is true moving forward, which is why they were able to re-sign Pascal. Since Indiana was so conscious of their regulations and restrictions moving forward, they were able to build a team with enough depth to take out the Knicks, who definitely look like the better team on paper, especially if you compare their first and second best players. Due to Indiana's roster building, players who you wouldn't traditionally expect to play hero ball rise to the occasion. And they don't absolutely need their 1A players to stuff the stat sheet in order to win. Going into 2026, they might have to dispel their streak of almost never paying the luxury tax. They're probably going to re-sign Miles Turner, who's pretty good for most of the playoffs. Along with a few other acquisitions, they might be forced to dip into that tax more than they ever have in their entire history as a franchise. Even still, the Pacers have wiggle room heading into 2026, and they've been an example of how to build a competitive team in the new era of the CBA and the second apron. The Minnesota Timberwolves made a drastic decision last offseason that really signaled to us that we're in deep with this new era of the CBA. In 2015, Karl Anthony Towns was drafted by a laughably bad organization. After he helped turn them into bona fide contenders by 2024, the Wolves were forced to trade him. Flashback, a year before the spring of 2023, the Wolves made their first big splash of the Karl Anthony Towns era, trading 4 first-round picks and a bunch of other guys for Rudy Gobert. Well, when Gobert punched Kyle Anderson in the midst of a bad playoff flameout, we penciled this in as another devastating move by the Wolves front office. Not only did they break the entire trade market in an offseason where KD was looking to move, by the way, but the very next day after that trade, they gave Cat his $55 million deal, locking in this core. The second apron of the NBA regulations broke this core apart after it bounced back and brought Minnesota to its most successful season of the post-Kevin Garnett era. Hindsight tells us that they were able to make it just as far without Cat, but at the time, this felt like a devastating move, and we weren't really able to wrap our heads around it. Ant's supposed lifetime partner was shipped to New York. In the new CBA era, teams with championship pedigree rosters, like the Minnesota Timberwolves, are forced to break up their core just to stay under the second apron. These are not basketball decisions. They are decisions made out of financial desperation. The other conference runner-up, the New York Knicks, had a monster offseason in 2024. The New York Knicks were a team that saw a diamond in the rough, a superstar with Jalen Brunson, when he was just a second option to Luka on the Dallas Mavericks, averaging 16 points per game. His debut season in New York was an offensive explosion. He raised his points per game by 8. And then the next year, 2024, he raised his points per game again by 5. In the meantime, they lost in the conference semifinals twice. But New York thought they were just a few pieces away from not only getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, but winning a Larry O'Brien outright for the city of New York. They traded Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a first-round pick to the Wolves for Karl Anthony Towns. Then acquired Mikal Bridges for 5 firsts and a first-round swap. Although the 2025 Knicks found themselves closer to a championship than the 2024 Knicks, and they've done better every year since the Jalen Brunson acquisition, the franchise and the fan base still find themselves scratching their head at what to do next. They say players get coaches fired, but what does the future of this roster even look like under the new landscape of the second apron? Tom Thibodeau got canned for falling short of the NBA Finals against a matchup in the East that many people favored for New York. This wasn't Thibodeau's first early exit from a franchise due to wearing his guys out. I know all too well as a Bulls fan how that goes, but in the case of New York, did Tibbs overplay his starters because of a lack of talent on the bench? Or was the bench so minimally productive because of Tibbs' shortcoming as a head coach? It's hard to say for certain, but being only $8 million onto the second apron, they aren't going to be the most flexible team going into 2026. Not to mention, they still have no head coach at the time of the recording of this video, despite running around like a door-to-door salesman to other NBA franchises. They got turned down from the Bulls, from the Mavericks, from a bunch of other franchises, and they still don't seem to know what they're doing at the head coach position. But I'll say this, if it weren't for Jalen Brunson's massive financial sacrifice and pay cut last season, the Knicks would likely have a disaster on their hands with the lack of depth and financial flexibility under the second apron. Staying in the East, there's a team whose championship window seems to be long gone in the rearview mirror. They're forced to trade one of their key pieces to revitalize that opportunity, a guy who still has gas left in the tank. For anyone who just assumes Chris Middleton is washed, I mean, that's not unfair. He's 33 and injured all the time. But just remember, only 1 year ago, he averaged 24 points in the playoffs when Giannis went out. I'm talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. In a world without the second apron, the Bucks could have ran it back one more time with Giannis, Dame, Chris, and Brook Lopez. But the decision to trade Chris Middleton for a guy who's much worse offensively in Kyle Kuzma was not made in the best interest of winning basketball right now. It was made out of financial desperation and staying out of the second apron. When the Bucks mounted the most epic finals comeback of the decade so far, we had just no idea how catastrophic of a disaster they created for their opponent in the Phoenix Suns. The 2023 NBA season for the Phoenix Suns was as dramatic as it gets for an NBA franchise over the course of a single season. Coming off a year in which they were the winningest team in the NBA, but got pantsed by Luka and the Mavericks in the playoffs, they decided to mortgage their future for a bona fide top 5 player at the time in Kevin Durant. For those who don't remember the trade packages, they gave Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, and 4 first-round picks for KD. Then they gave Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, and 4 swaps and 6 second-round picks, if I'm getting that right, for Bradley Beal after they lost in the playoffs. The 2021 scoring record belonged to Steph Curry in one of his career seasons, but Bradley Beal was right there behind him, averaging 31 points per game that season. Kevin Durant contends with Michael Jordan as one of the greatest scorers of all time, and Devin Booker had just spearheaded one of the most successful seasons in the history of the Suns organization. That made this roster easily one of, if not the most potent offensive trios in NBA history. When free agency opened up in the offseason of 2023, it looked like the Suns just let anyone in to sign a vet minimum. Some were impressed with how rapidly they filled vacated roster spots.
The Phoenix Suns might be having the best start to free agency this year.
Some reports suggested that the Suns got guys in only 90 minutes into free agency, but Yuta Watanabe, Bol Bol, Jordan Goodwin, Drew Eubanks, Chimezie Metu, and some of the other guys they put on the team, we should have known that they could never have been championship level depth pieces. And apologies if I fucked up the pronunciation there. You look at championship acquisitions in the NBA. For example, the Warriors traded D'Angelo Russell and some other stuff for Andrew Wiggins, a guy who was key to their 4th championship in the dynasty. The Suns could never have made a move like that when the Celtics traded Malcolm Brogdon and Robert Williams for Drew Holiday. Again, a championship caliber acquisition that the Suns could never have used to build out their roster under the second apron. When you enter the second apron as the Suns did, you better hope the superstars on your roster can do enough to make you a threat. The Suns were literally only able to sign vet minimums alongside their headliners, and that just doesn't cut it in today's NBA. About the Celtics, they're definitely over the second apron, and at the present moment they are restricted by it, but there's no regret in the front office. They won a championship after all. I mean, shit. Since Tatum and Brown have been on the roster for about a decade, just stacking up accolades, All-NBAs, things like that. They were both eligible for the Supermax, which is 35% of the team's cap space, by the way, for 5 years. They built out that supporting cast before these Supermaxes kicked in. And although they coasted to a title in 2024, long overdue, by the way, they're scratching their heads at how to max out the rest of the Jays' prime. It's no secret that they have been looking to move off of KP and Drew for a while now, and they just did it. But even in some of the wildest hypotheticals, they have to get rid of Jaylen Brown just to stay flexible. As I'm recording this video, a lot of the motion has been set to totally retooling this Celtics roster. Like I said, Drew was just traded, And today, as I'm recording this video, Kristaps Porzingis was just traded. It's almost impossible to keep championship rosters together when a team is above the second apron. And we're seeing that with the Celtics now. They're not going to be a threat in the East next year after they looked incredibly dominant just 2 years ago. There's a team right now out West who has the potential to be even more dominant than the Celtics ever were in the era of the second apron. They have a bunch of guys who are definitely under market value right now, and they still have a motherload of draft picks. Shea is an MVP making only $40 million until 2028. Chet and J-Dub are on rookie contracts for another year, and they have 2 first-round picks this year, next year, the year after that, and 2029. I don't even know what you do with all those assets in today's NBA. But with today's NBA contracts, you see guys like Fred VanVleet making $40 million a year or more. But the Thunder got their guy, the MVP of the league, the scoring champion, and the finals MVP, far before he became what he is today, meaning he can do so much heavy lifting on the offensive end. But his contract makes the team's cap so flexible that they can create the best supporting cast in the NBA as well. For now, they're probably safe from the second apron, and they can keep making trades and acquisitions like they did last year that moved this team over the hump, like trading Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso. Anyway, that's all I have for today. I think that the Thunder are primed to be potentially the first dynasty or repeat champions in the era of the second apron. But, I mean, we haven't seen a repeat champion in 7 years, and it feels like the era of parity and small markets having a chance is in full swing. So I appreciate you guys watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on what the new landscape of the NBA looks like. I know that there's so much more going on in the 2020s NBA that's not looked upon so positively, and I could talk about that all day too. But a lot of people think that the second apron of regulations and NBA cap space and roster building and all that is something that could be life-changing for the NBA, and I think it already has been. And I think that we haven't seen a repeat champion since the Warriors because of this, and it's going to be so much harder to build a winner in today's NBA. So leave a like.